I said, you've only come down like now if you feel up to it. You know, no.
Cheat.
Because I'm usually out working, Michael.
I know.
It was cheeky, though, wasn't it? Yeah. I'm glad I got Freddie to support me. Right. Can I say, first of all, we talk about, and all Christians will say at some time or other, will share their testimony. And okay, it's their story, but it's not strictly our testimony. It's a testimony to what God has done. And my story that I can share with you is just a testimony to what God did in my life and my family's life. It's nothing that I can say, look how clever I am, you listen to this, you listen to what I've done. Not what I did at all, it's what God does. So we can do very little on our own, but when we allow the Lord a bit of space in our lives, He can do all that's needed and all that's required. So my coming to faith started off quite the opposite of what you said, Ken, because it wasn't my parents.
No. But they weren't atheists,
Hang on. In 1964 is when things started to change a bit for me, because my son was going to Muschamp Road infant school, and it's still there, Rick, isn't it? Yeah. And during the RE lessons, Keith had a lady teacher who taught them a lot about Jesus, and I don't know whether that was genuine in schools, was it, that they're going to have somebody going to talk to them about the Lord, but this lady did. In the RE lesson, she made sure that everybody in the class got to know about Jesus. Now, that did something for my son, for young Keith, and he wanted to know more about Jesus. We couldn't help him. I didn't know anything about the Lord Jesus, and neither did my wife, so we couldn't help him at all. And his grandparents couldn't help him either. But 2 doors along from us, we had a family. She was a Scot, Jim was an Englishman. Jim had been in the army, been in Scotland, met Ina and married, and then she came down. And so I remember Jim, he died quite a few years ago, but he and I were football mates, so we went all over the country up north as well, watching football. But the thing was that Ina was a member at Carshorton Baptist Church. That's the little church down on the end of along the end of Strawberry Lane.
Yeah.
And so Ina had said to my wife, she said, well look, if Keith would like to go to church, I could take him to church every Sunday. So she did. And so I can't remember when that started, but it worked fine right through until the summer, and Ina and Jim went off on holiday. So Ina said to Keith, I'm sorry Keith, she said, but we're going on holiday, we won't be able to take you on holiday anymore. And Keith's reply to that was to turn to his mum and say, well, you could take me then, couldn't you, Mum, on Sunday morning, just say.
Yeah.
My wife couldn't very well refuse. She said, no, of course I could. Well, you know, God did enough in my wife's life in those 2 weeks, enough to get her knowing that she wanted to know more too, which is absolutely staggering. I mean, I'd been going on and off to different meetings for years after that, never did anything for me at all. But God obviously had said something to my wife. You know, she wanted to know more about this, so she started to go regularly, and it means she took our daughter Wendy with them. So hard heart here remained outside the camp, as it were. But all that was sort of the first little bit of my story. Now, my wife then was going to church regularly, and the only times I ever went to church was just on the odd occasion on a Sunday morning, and that was really to please my wife. I didn't get really very much from it at all, and I had no great desire to go to church, so I went. I knew it would please Ivy if I went to church, so I used to go with her. And then each Sunday evening they had what they called after church fellowship. Whether you've experienced that anywhere else, Rick?
Is that called evensong?
No. This was something that happened just in the church, And what it was I think it was about three families who opened up their home on a Sunday evening after the meeting, so that the young people, we didn't have an evening meeting, so the young, well, we did have an evening, this was after the evening meeting, so the young people had got somewhere to go. So they met, and my wife said to me one week, she said, you know, our two, she said, Keith and Wendy, they're part of this, and she said they're getting invited to these other 2 or 3 homes. Do you think we could do that? Invite them to us, you see? Well, I can tell you, what did I say about that? I thought, giving up my lounge on a Sunday evening, at the end of Sunday, when I was ready to put my feet up and get ready for Monday, just to go and spend the evening in our living room, that wasn't very attractive for me.
No.
But again, what my wife was saying was right. My children were being given hospitality by 2 other families, so we agreed to do that. That was the second thing coming along then that really did something to me, because these youngsters come in, and I went upstairs, or I sat in our living room at the back, but I could hear what was going on. So there's a crowd of these youngsters. I think there was usually about 12 or 14 of them, and because the church down there had a wonderful youth group, and but in the whole of that evening I could hear them singing, praying together, laughing, just having a whale of a time. No drink, no drugs, no bad language, no dirty jokes, nothing at all, but greatly enjoying themselves. And I started to think, wow, these kids have got something here. You know, there's something that's making these kids very special. And one of them particularly had a quite, his second name was Greg. He was the evangelist amongst them. And a couple of times in the past, since then I've met him, and I've pulled his leg a little bit, I said, you used to come into my kitchen, I said, because I agreed to make the tea for you all. I said, you came and shut the door, you trapped me in my kitchen, didn't you? I wouldn't have done that. I said, but you did, Greg, you know. But that was another little step along the way for me. Here was a group of young people meeting on a Sunday evening, having a thoroughly good evening together, and they were having a good evening, I could hear it. And I usually perhaps put my head out as they were all going, but they'd all say cheerio to me and off they go, and I think they've had a really good evening. They've done nothing that's unwholesome at all, you know. So I thought that was great. Well, in 1977, my wife said to me, she said there's a crusade, a Christian crusade going on Croydon Airport, or on Croydon Airport site, and she says it's going to last for 2 weeks, and the second week coincided with our holiday. We had a trailer van at that time. We were going to take it up to North Yorkshire, and she'd like me to go. Well, I mean, I had no idea what a crusade was. I only really had a smattering idea of what it meant to be a Christian, but I certainly didn't know what a crusade was. But anyway, again, if it pleased my wife, I said yes. Well, all right, I'll come along. So I went along. I didn't go with any great anticipation of anything that was going to happen at all. But the first evening was all right, because there was a choir, and one of the young ladies that was in the church there at Strawberry Lane, she was part of the choir. So the singing and the music was good. I quite enjoyed that. I thought, well, that's good. And then this fella, Dick Saunders. You ever heard of Dick Saunders? Yeah. He was the speaker for this fortnight's crusade, and everybody was quite well known. I obviously have never heard of the bloke before at all, but he opened the meeting, and then he spoke, shared from his Bible, with the usual thing. He got the same every night, and that was, after sharing the gospel with people, he then made an invitation. If anybody would like to know more about having a personal relationship with Jesus, they could go forward at the end of the meeting and meet somebody who would talk to them about that, pray for them, whatnot. And so that went on from that Saturday evening, went right the way through, was the same each evening. And I thought, oh well, I've said I'll go for a week, so I better continue to go for a week. You know, I couldn't suddenly tell my wife that I wasn't going anymore. So I continued to go, and it was no different at all until the Wednesday of the next week. And that Wednesday I found it very difficult to explain, because all of a sudden it was quite different. You know, my wife and children talked about God and Jesus quite regularly. And my son also, it was a bit of an evangelist. I wouldn't say he bullied me, but he said to me on one occasion, "Dad, why do you have to be such an unbeliever?" You see. So, but on that night I suddenly realised that this God that they were always talking about, I suddenly realised that he was real. Because having heard the same message on this Wednesday as I'd been hearing for the few days before, all of a sudden it became real to me. And I thought, wow, I have to do something about this. I mean, I was totally immature as far as our faith's concerned, so I didn't know that God was beginning to talk to me. I didn't really, if anybody had said that, I'd have laughed that off. But afterwards I realised that that's what was happening. God was beginning to just draw my attention. And it was all, I could imagine God saying, well, you've heard all this many times before and you've just poo-pooed it. Tonight you need to make a decision about it. And so I knew that night something had changed. Well, they got the usual invitation, but I couldn't go forward. I sat in my chair and all I wanted to do was just think about what was happening, because I knew that something in me had changed. If you'd have said to me, what's changed? I thought, I don't really know. But all of a sudden I found out that what that man had been preaching about tonight actually done something for me. It actually meant something to me, and God was using it to speak to me, to achieve something in my life. And so, so I didn't do anything at all. And then and then on the Thursday and the Friday, and I have to confess, I really looked forward to both those evenings, and it was great. I heard all through, and I joined in with the singing. I heard what he had to say, and all of a sudden, I was beginning to feel a part of it. And then on the Saturday, we went off on holiday, and we were going away just for a week. Just my wife and I and our daughter. Pete had gone off somewhere with the Scouts. So it was just us three and our two dogs up to North Yorkshire. And we were going to be there until the following Saturday. I think it was about the Wednesday or the Thursday. My wife said to me, she said, Wendy said, do you think we could go home a day earlier? Do you think we could go home on Friday instead of going home on the Saturday? Because she said she would like to be there for the closing ceremony on the Saturday. And I said, well, actually, I've been thinking about that myself. I too would like to be there for that ceremony on the Saturday. So that's we agreed that that's what we would do. So we got home and we went along to that same meeting. Let me find where I am on all these notes I've made. So we were home. We had the meeting on the closing meeting on the Saturday. On the Sunday morning was really a very special time for me, because I went to church on the Sunday morning with my wife and my two children. And when I look back at it, I thought that was the first time I could say that we were a Christian family. We actually went along to church together, and that was very special. I can still remember that Sunday morning. That was so very, very special to me. Come on, get the pages undone. That's right. Now, at that time, I obviously was working, and I was working in the gambling industry. I was under contract to Littlewoods Pools, the biggest of the pools companies by quite a long way, probably almost as big as the rest of them put together. But I worked for them. I was only under contract, because I didn't employ people who were working outside for them. I was under contract for their home collection business. Now, for anybody who's ever had coupons delivered to your home and collected by a Littlewoods collector. I was responsible for, it was a circular area I had. It was a big chunk of South London like that, and the circle was completed by a chunk of North Surrey. And it was my responsibility in that week not just to arrange for the agents that we had to do their collecting, but it was also a responsibility of mine to see that Littlewoods business grew season by season in that area. So it wasn't just an administrative thing. They needed to know that things were happening. Or otherwise you'd find yourself looking around for another part-time job. So after that, we're now into 1978, and all of a sudden I found myself thinking about the job I was doing. Now, I'd never thought about whether it was the sort of job I ought to be doing. I'd never had any conscience about it at all. But all of a sudden, without any pressure from anybody, except that I know that God was then beginning to just gently touch me, and He does only gently do things. God doesn't. When people say, "Oh, God came down and hit you," no, He doesn't do things like that at all. It's very gentle. He leads us, and I began to think about the morality of what I was doing. I thought, I am persuading people to spend as much money as they can, and for a lot of them, most of them, for nothing. You know, you've all seen people buying yards and yards of lottery tickets, whatnot else. I've seen them in Morrison's, and I feel like tapping them on the shoulder and saying, if you give all that to me, I know a good charity I could give that to, because somebody will get something out of that. How much do you think you're going to win out of all that lot? The odds against you winning any of it are millions to one, haven't they? So I began to think about it, and I spent a whole year thinking in that way. So one day I would say, well, it is my job. I've got to earn a living, so no, I can carry on doing it. The next day I'll be saying just the opposite. I can't continue to do this. It's really troubling me. I've taken all this money off people, and what am I promising? The people who work for me was giving out little leaflets that said the only way of real happiness is to win a fortune on Littlewoods Falls. Well, you know, that is so much rubbish that, mind you, at that time, you see, the people who were working for me, and there were a lot of them, they believed all that when they put it out, and I suppose I did too, to start with, but I really began to think about that. And so I went all through the year like that, and I didn't talk too much about my job, because this was a Baptist church we were going to. Now, drinking and gambling in a Baptist church is frowned upon. In fact, it's almost more than frowned upon. I didn't think it was right at all. And I thought, if I start telling them what I do for a living, I'll probably get drummed out of the ground. They wouldn't have done, but they would not have liked it. So I purposely didn't say anything about it at all. And then on one of these meetings on Sunday evenings, because they still continue to go in my house, except that I got involved in them too. I took part in them. And just in conversation, I found out that one of the men, one of the husbands of one of the couples, who Rick knows, he became a both of them became very good, very special friends for us. Ken let it be said that he knew what I did for a living, you see, because he suddenly said out the room, he said, because your salary is seasonal, isn't it? He said, you don't earn so much in the summer when the pool's not running, do you? He said, I thought, wow, Ken Goodson knows, you see. Well, that was on a Sunday evening, and on the Monday morning, I mean, at the end of the day, I collected a whole lot of money for Littlewoods. A lot of it was in coins. We tried to persuade all the people who worked for us to pay us in cheques, but lots of it was still in money. And so I had a special arrangement with Barclays Bank. I could get along there an hour before they opened. They would let me in because they didn't want great sackfuls of money arriving with their customers, so they allowed me to go in early. So I got all the stuff ready and continually still thinking about this, is it all right, isn't it? And I remember on this Monday morning, and I could show you exactly where I was standing in my living room, got all the stuff ready to go to the bank, and I thought, well, if Ken Goodson thinks it's okay, it must be all right. And at that moment, God responded to that, and I can still hear those words, the most amazing words I've ever heard. And God didn't speak to me in words, but it was just as clear as if it was in words, because it changed things for me completely then.
Yeah.
What God said to me was, you see, in answer to what I said, well, if Ken Gibson says he's all right, must be all right. And then God said to me, but what about your God? And wow, it was as if I'd been hit by a sledgehammer. I couldn't move off the spot. I stood there for a minute and I just could not move. I thought, wow, at last, God's answered this for me. You know, there's no doubt now. So I went off the bank, did what I had to do at the bank, came back straight home, sat down at my desk and wrote out my resignation letter to Littlewoods. I had to give them 3 months' notice. That was the contract I had with them. And I had to sign to say I would never work for any other Paul's companies. So that was how God finally spoke to me about making that decision.
Yeah.
What about, and I think of those words often, and to me they were, I don't think anybody will ever say anything that has quite that same impact in my life.
Yeah.
So I began to wonder what I ought to do for a living, because I knew all about the administration of the business that had been running, but it was my administration. I'd set it all up, so I knew how it worked, but it wasn't commercial administration, so I couldn't have gone and worked into an office job or a management job. I managed my own business and adminned it, but I couldn't just have walked into another company. So I started to think about what I could do. Well, in the local paper it said one of the direct selling insurance companies, Hambro Life, they were advertising direct selling salesman. Direct selling means you got no salary, you only got paid commission from what you sold. To say, well, that seemed all right to me. I thought, yeah, I'm sure. I've been self-employed for a lot of years anyway, so I thought, yeah, that'd be all right. And I spent 4 years there, and there was one thing I proved when those 4 years. I proved I was probably the world's worst life assurance salesman. I really was no good at it at all. Now, for every item, for every separate policy that an insurance salesman sells, you have to first of all do an examination. You're then marked on your results, and then you're issued with a license. And that license says you can sell that particular product. And every product you wanted to sell, you had to do and with Hambro it was a week's course. You went away to Swindon, you did a week's training. At the end of the week, you sat a test, and you were marked according to, and then you were assessed as whether or not you get your license. All that part of it, I had no problem at all. Mind you, I say I had no problem at all. I used to sit up in bed late at night, swatting up, whereas the younger fellas, they'd all taken it in so much quicker, and they'd gone out on the town enjoying themselves. But I had to sit up in bed swatting to make sure. So that went on, and then where am I going on to? Oh yeah, 1982, the 4 years after I started this work, we were on holiday up in Cheshire. We'd started to go, in fact this was our 6th year we'd been there. We'd been to the Dow's Bible Week, which was held on the North Yorkshire Showground just outside of Harrogate, and we'd thoroughly enjoyed that. And so we used to have a week there, and then we'd leave there and go somewhere else to spend the 2nd week of our holiday. And on the 2nd week of our holiday, and on the day before we were due to go home, I had my first heart attack. So I shall always remember my holiday in Cheshire. in Chester. And so I was in dock for 10 days. I remember my wife said to the doctor, well, we live in Carshalton, couldn't I take him home? And the doctor said, he won't survive a journey home. He said, you better leave him with here for us for a week, she said. And so, of course, my wife had to stay behind. And she had the caravan, and then Ken of the couple, he went off home because he had to go to work, but his wife Pauline, she stayed with my wife, and they lived in the caravan for a week. But at the end of my week there, the consultant said to me, he said, well, he said, we've done a few tests, he said, what do you do for a living? So I told him, oh, he said, well, get out of that business, he said, as soon as you can. He said, because he said, that I'm sure is the cause of your problem. He said, we can't find anything wrong with your heart at all. Well, I'm afraid that St George's in recent years would say they don't agree with him. But at that time, he said, so I decided that's what I do. I thought, well, I don't want any more of these heart attacks.
No.
So, and I'd not enjoyed this 4 years anyway. I mean, it was not to be any good at anything. I wasn't craving for success, but really I just wanted to earn enough money so we could start paying our bills, because we couldn't do it at that time. This particular couple, Ken and Pauline Goodson, and I've always thanked God for them, because I'm sure they were two people that God put alongside us to support us, and support us they did in every way, including financially. They put money our way quite regularly, because all of a sudden I wasn't earning any money, I wasn't selling insurance, so I wasn't earning. My wife had gone out and taken a job. Fortunately, she had quite high qualifications, so she was able to get a job and ended up with quite a senior position with where she worked. But I didn't, and so my wife, all the way through, before any of this happened, all the way through the time when I was self-employed with our business, my wife used to keep our figures for us, because bookkeeping was one of her particular skills. So at the end of the week, she'd say, oh, at the end of the month, she'd say, she'd tot all the figures up and say, well, you know, we've spent out this month, got this month come in, so we've got this in. So well, I said, so is God helping us? She said, well, there is no other explanation. Yes, of course he is. And so that put in threads some just totally miraculous happenings. You know, you can say whether or not we believe in miracles. I experienced them. I got a car that was on its last legs, and it needed some repair work done. And I remember the bill was I think just over £110 or something like that. I can't remember the exact. And I hadn't even got 110 pennies at that time.
That's a heck of a lot of money in those days.
£110.
That was a heck of a lot of money in those days.
It was, yeah. So I didn't, I just put it aside. I thought, well, the car would have to go until it, but I couldn't do the work I was doing without a car. Well, we went to our evening meeting at the church one evening. We came home and I put my keys in the door, tried to open the door, and the door wouldn't open. Someone was blocking the door. That's strange, and Keith was with me, so we did what we could. We kept on rubbing it. In here we got it enough so Keith got his arm round. Oh, he said there's an envelope or something behind the door now. So he got the envelope out. I opened it up, and what's inside? Exactly the amount of money to pay this car repair on my bill, you see. And I have to say that I didn't do that. I think it was probably the only time I got really angry, but I did, because there was a lot of pride in me still. I mean, God has dealt with all that in years since, but there was still, and I could look after my family. In fact, I couldn't, because I hadn't been looking after them properly for quite some while, but I thought there was somebody else. So I said, Keith, well, what happened? How did it get here? I can imagine God dropping it through the... So Keith said, Dad, he said, you don't understand, do you? He said, a number of people in the church have been praying for you and Mum. He said, they're praying for your situation. And we were pretty sure we knew who had donated the money to us. And he said, God has actually told them the amount that you need, and so there it is.
Right.
Now, if that's not a miracle, you know,
Oh, jeez.
they don't come any more miraculous than that, do they? So I thought, wow.
I say God moves in strange circles. It's true.
I thought you really are real, aren't they? Then after my heart attack, well, in those days, I know it's not the same now because I've had 2 heart attacks since, but when you had a heart attack then, whether it was mild, severe or whatever it was, you had to have 3 months off work completely. And they gave you a green sheet. It was known as the famous green sheet, and it told you when you could start doing things, you know. The first item is start walking sort of down to the bottom of your road and coming back again. And it went on and on like this. To the end of the 3 months, you could think about going back to work again. Well, I wasn't going to work in the insurance industry, but I just felt I wanted to do something for God. He'd done so much for me. I thought I want to be employed in some way for Him. And of course, my wife was having to go to work, and so one afternoon I was sitting at home in our lounge, sitting on the settee, just really dreaming about things, which I often do now. I don't know whether you ever do that, Rick. I do. I just sit and think about things that I'm trying to sort out. And on that occasion, I was just thinking about nothing at all. And this amazing thought dropped into my mind. I suddenly thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if the church decided to open up a church office, which we didn't have at that time, and they asked me to open it up for them. And that was it, and I just forgot all about it. Well, as the end of the 3 months came up, I'd written to quite a number of Christian organisations, had a few replies, only one of them actually offered me an interview. And so I spoke to the people. They were down in Kent somewhere, and they told me what it implied, and I was quite sure that I could do that for him all right. He was involved in bringing together funding for various types of missionary work abroad. And he said, what I want, he said, somebody who's used to approaching high management to talk to them about, well, I'd got used to doing that in insurance. I wasn't able to prize any money away from any of them, but I did get used to talking to them. And so I said I would like to do that. So he said, well, my secretary will ring you. And he said, I'll need 2 references. But then he said, we'll arrange for you to come down for an interview. So that was all right. Well, our pastor at that time, he came along, saw me every week. I think it must have been either a Tuesday or a Wednesday, I can't remember which. But he came along one day every week, and he brought his lunch with him, sat with me and had lunch with me and prayed for me. And if it was during, well, it was a lot of it during the summer, Alan would look out the window, and if the lawn looked as if the grass was getting long, he'd get my mower out and mow the lawn for me, you know. And so I told him about this, and he said, oh, okay. He said, well, yes, I can give you a reference, but he said, before you make any decision about that, he said, there's something that I'd like to talk to you about. I said, oh, okay. So I think, thinking that I might be booking an appointment with this fella straight away, on the next day, Alan came to see me again. And he said, look, he said, you haven't done anything about the other. I said, no, I haven't done anything at all, Alan. And I said, I can't do anything until I've got some references. Right, he said, well, this is what's happening at the church. He said, the elders and myself, he said, we've decided we're going to make another full-time appointment. And he said, we've not been able to decide whether it's a second minister, an assistant pastor, or we open up a full-time church office and have an administrator. He said, you know, so he said, I'd really like just to broach the question of an administrator's job to you. So I said, wow. I said, well, yeah, I'm certainly interested in that. Yeah, definitely. Never entered my head that this is what God has said to me a few weeks before that. I'd forgotten about that completely. So I think a few days later it was arranged that I came out a meeting with the pastor and the elders, They told me what it was. I told them all about myself. I didn't put any punches. I told them exactly what I'd been involved in. That didn't make any at all. They were more interested in where I was now, not what had gone before. And so it was agreed I would take this job on. I mean, there wasn't anything there then. Eventually, when I opened the office, we became the first church in Sutton that had a full-time church office. Other churches had somebody who popped in, perhaps on an odd hour a week, do a bit of typing or something. But we had a full-time church office. Nothing else except me. On the day I started, my office was an empty room with nothing in it at all. Never a telephone, desk, chair or anything. And anyway, that's beside the point. And then, where do we go on there? Yeah. The Wednesday when I'd heard this message, which I know was the beginning of changing things in my life for me. That was in 1977, and it was on May the 23rd. Now, on May the 23rd, 1993, was the day my wife died. And to start with, I never tied those two dates up at all. I mean, at that time, my mind was full of the fact that she died. Eventually, I did realise that it was the same day, and I thought, well, that is amazing. In 1977, I'd come to know Christ, and in 1993, on the same day, God had taken my wife home to meet with Christ. You know, I thought, wow, what an amazing, wonderful God we have. You know, I was beginning to be blown away by all of this, and it just set me back to think. I thought, when I remember that I'd spent a number of years persuading people to winning large prizes, the only way to happiness, and I know that for real happiness, we need to know Christ and Him crucified. That's all we need in life. The only reason I share this particular story is because it has a lot of things, nothing that I've done it. There's lots of things that God's done, and I think we all need to think about our lives now. What's God doing in our life now? I wonder how many of us could answer that. I know Rick would tell you what's happened, what God's doing in his life right now. I can, but we need to be able to ask this of ourselves. You know, what's God doing in my life at this moment? Because our testimony is not what God did 20 or 30 years ago. It's what He's doing now. You know, and we can't live in our history. God's not interested in our history. His history is interested in where you are right now. And it's all summed up in that tiny little short verse in our Bible, John 3:16, which says, God so loved the world, the whole of the world, that He gave His only Son, that whoever believes in Him, not whoever goes to church 3 times on Sunday or reads their Bible for 10 hours a day, but for everybody who believes in Him, believes in the Lord Jesus, will not perish, but live everlasting life. How many of us really, I mean, do you really believe that, Ken? You've got to find that, I know, but it's individuals, and it's not history, Ken, it's today.
That's right.
It's what are you thinking about today? And you say you believe in that verse about God only, but it's not fellowship, Ken.
No.
We can all talk, we can all share that verse together, which is wonderful. But it's for each one of us individually. You know, do we really believe that?
That's right.
Do we really believe that Jesus died on that cross for us? You know, He did it for me.
That's right.
Okay, I mean, that lovely 23rd Psalm says, the Lord is my shepherd. And I'm always saying to people in homes, look, the Lord is the shepherd for all of us. So however many there are in this particular meeting, at the moment there's 6 of us. The Lord is for us. But for each one of us can say individually, without any any reference to anybody else, each one of us can say, the Lord is my shepherd.
Yeah.
See, the Lord is, He's my shepherd.
Yeah.
He's shepherd for all of us, but your concern, Ken, is that He's the shepherd for you. Now, how are you responding to Him? You see, there are lots of kind and good people about that are doing that, not because they're a Christian or because they've got any faith. I work in nursing homes all through the week, as you know. Lots of the carers there are good people.
They are.
Some of them. One of them that I work with at one home, I work quite closely with. She doesn't have a faith, but she's the most amazing people person I've met. She really is a people person. She loves everybody, every resident now, and she loves. She has no faith at all, Ken. You know,
Why should
the only
she have
thing,
faith?
the only way she's going to have a faith is to turn to the Lord Jesus and just tell Him that she wants Him to be a part of her life, and we all need to do that. Some of us have done that.
Yeah.
We open up our hearts and lives to Him, ask Him to be a part of our life, ask Him to come and fill us with His Holy Spirit, thank Him for taking away our sins from us, giving us a whole new start. That was my feeling after I became a Christian. I thought, wow, I've been given a new start. You know, I've been given a fresh start in life. I'm starting off with a clean sheet, as it were.
True.
So,
But do you
that's a
ever
step.
get-
That's a step we need to take, and you can't bypass it, Ken.
No.
You can't bring other things in.
No.
That
But do
decision you have to make. Each one of us has to make. Some of us have already made it.
Yeah.